This past summer, former Burlington Police Chief Michael Schirling ended a glowing 25-year career with the Burlington Police Department. And within months, the mayor announced Schirling had accepted a new position as Executive Director of Tech Initiative BTV Ignite. There's lots to talk about with Michael Schirling next on Connect.
Connect on Vermont PBS is sponsored in part by the Alma Gibbs Donchen Foundation, supporting Vermont institutions that support the underserved and promoting the betterment of life for all.
Burlington-born Michael Schirling served as a patrol officer, detective, investigator, and commander of the Vermont Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force, among many other roles at Burlington's police department, culminating in his service as chief of police for the past 7 years. Now he's following another passion, technology, as head of an initiative to utilize an ultra-high-speed computer network to forward economic development and make Burlington one of America's tech hubs. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to go backward before we go forward with what you're doing now. First, you were employed by the Burlington Police Department as an auxiliary officer at age 19. And even before that, you were hired by the Winooski Police Department. So
Winooski actually came just after that.
Oh, really?
It was Burlington first. I was employed by Colchester before that as a dispatcher.
Right.
Which
Emergency
from,
person.
Yeah, from rescue back when I was 16.
So what is the minimum age of a police officer now?
Well, it's now 21.
Okay.
Probably because of some of the things I did when I was 19.
I doubt it. But why did you want to become a policeman? So, yeah.
I didn't. It was entirely by accident. I was at the American Red Cross in 1986 taking first aid class so that I could be a lifeguard, a city job actually, and ran into some people there who were going to join Colchester Rescue and learned that they had a junior member program and said, well, that sounds interesting. I grew up watching Emergency and Chips,
Sure.
70s TV shows, and then Chief Gary Kessler brought me on to rescue, and one thing led to another, and I was working at a toy store at the time, Kessler's Toy Store in Burlington,
Sure.
locally owned, long-standing Burlington retail establishment, and from rescue learned that the Colchester Police Department was hiring part-time dispatchers on weekends, and they paid a lot more. So I started doing that in my junior year in high school.
Wow.
And then at UVM, found out that Burlington hired auxiliary police officers and thought that would be interesting to see. Been doing rescue for a few years at that point, what that side of things was like, and one thing led to another, and that was a really long time ago.
And you were majoring in political science at UVM and then eventually got your master's in education while you were a cop on the beat, I guess. I mean, did you have different aspirations? Did you think you would stay?
Well, originally I wanted to go to medical school. I was a biology major when I started at UVM, and it didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. 18-year-old boys aren't always as focused as they are later in life. So, switched to political science and
stuck with the department.
It is actually amazing how there's a symbiosis to things. My advisor at UVM was Frank Bryan,
Wow.
The legendary political science professor. Frank Bryan's son, Frank Bryan, was just hired as a police officer in Burlington.
No
It
kidding.
is a small town.
Wow, it is a small town. So how is policing different today than it was when you started? I mean, I know this is a big question, but what are some key pieces that you would stick out for you?
The pace. The pace is quite different. The cross section of policing that is service-based and not criminal investigation, I think, would surprise people. It's always been large, but it's even larger now, about 85 to 90%.
So what do you mean by that, service-based?
It's not investigating a crime or a car break or an assault. It's helping someone who's got a landlord-tenant dispute. It's an accident investigation, which is typically not a criminal thing. It's all kinds of dispute resolution kinds of things, and increasingly it's a large swath of mental health and social service provision.
And you were the first to really hire, I think, a mediator to deal with some of that instead of sending a policeman to a house.
We expanded that program. We had a mediator. We've had a mediator on staff for probably the better part of 15 years, but expanded that program significantly. The other major change is technology. When I started, we were using typewriters and carbon paper to do, and it sounds strange, late 80s, but there were 2 computers. They were both in the detective bureau area. And if you could get time on them, you could print things using old, green screen word processing technology. But it was largely done on typewriters with carbon paper. And when you made mistakes, the sergeants would mark them up in red and you'd type them over again.
Oh my goodness. So you brought the whole department up to the 21st century, basically.
Well, we built the 4th iteration of a computer system. When I started, we had an old IBM System 36 that the records unit could get into and take paper card files and enter information, and they would print out on the giant green and white sheets of paper.
Right.
But they were the only ones who could get in, and then there were 3 systems that followed that.
I would imagine that data is also better, just because, I mean, you can enter data and make more sense of it, to even know what you need in terms of prevention or other things.
Absolutely, and you can get up to the second information on trends and where things are happening, and resource deployment and things like that.
Police have been under a lot of scrutiny lately. What is important for a modern cop today? Is it a camera on every officer? Is it diversity training? Is it a psychology degree? Is it has that shifted? What a policeman needs?
What police officers need has the scope of responsibility has grown. We expect that at the end, that there are 2 places where sort of the buck stops. The end of the 911 phone, which is typically a police officer, or in an emergency department. The 2 places where you can't say no. So everything falls to a contemporary police officer to solve problems, whether it's a complex criminal investigation or it's a young child with a social service need. It all crashes together. So the scope and the depth of what we're asking officers to do today is much larger than what we were asking them to do 25 years ago, and that's a challenge.
And then it seems you also certainly, I mean, you've worked with the State Department on internet anti-terrorism efforts. I imagine you work closely with the DEA and feds on a number of different cases. And recently we had actually a shooting that was part of a drug enforcement initiative. Is that relationship similar, or has that changed? How good is that relationship between you and the federal government?
In Vermont, it's a very tight relationship with all criminal justice agencies for the most part, because it is a very small community. There's about 1,000, 1,100 full-time police officers, including federal agents and everyone in the state. So it's a very small cross-section of folks. So anytime you have anything of consequence going on, you have multiple agencies working on that issue or event, and it often involves federal agencies.
And who has the bottom line? Federal agencies or U.S. local police chief?
That's more of a fictional representation, although it probably happens in other areas of the country. This turf war is more of a fictional representation of how things actually work. It's wherever the case is best suited to travel through a federal system or a state system, whether it's a local department investigating a state agency or a federal agency. It's really done more as a symbiotic relationship and decision making for what's best for the case and the survivors and things like that.
Terrific. So it's been reported that only 1 homicide during your time as chief went unresolved. That's a pretty good record. Any
yes.
Other moments or things that you're particularly proud of? Technology, of course, bringing it up to date, but other things that cross your mind?
I think overall the department, probably 170 employees total when you factor in the part-time staff, about 138 full-time employees. Just what they do day in and day out, much of it behind the scenes, you hear about a tiny fragment of what happens on a day-to-day basis. And the level of community engagement that they have and their problem-solving skills, and that's the thing I think as I look back, probably intersected 400 plus people over the course of the years, and
Well,
they all operate at an incredibly high level.
so you went from a public position managing 170 people to a one-man office. And actually, we have a clip before you respond to that about your retirement and kind of why you said you were ready for a change.
It's not the years that get you, it's the miles. And I want to be able to have a long life. And there's no question that this work, whether it is in my role or any of the others, takes a toll.
So does the quiet, if there is quiet that I imagine, drive you crazy, or is it blissful? How are you doing moving into a very different kind of, from constant crisis all the time, every minute of the day, to something quite different?
It's been a really nice transition. I chat with Chief Del Pozo from time to time, and still have lots of connections at the department, so I still have a general idea of what's going on, but not being immersed in it, I actually thought I would miss more of it than I do. I do miss the connections and having an office full of people and the great work, but everyone says when you've stepped away from that job, whether it's, as I said in the press conference, as the chief or any other role, that it takes a while and you feel this weight lift. I didn't believe it. They were absolutely right. Yeah. You do.
So you are now heading up BTV Ignite, which Burlington was chosen one of 15 cities in the United States to be a gigabit city, and I think it had been around for a year or two, but they really needed somebody to move that initiative forward, and that is what you're doing. Can you just describe, what your charge is as ED?
Sure, it's just a small thing. Grow the technology ecosystem and the economy using technology as the backbone is sort of the meta narrative on what we're trying to accomplish. And gigabit, Burlington got an Ignite designation because we've got high-speed fiber citywide, and we're fortunate there are pockets of Vermont that have really good infrastructure. Burlington's one of them, and there are other areas that have great infrastructure. We've got, I think, 8 gigabit providers within the state, and I know they're building every day. So Burlington and the greater Burlington area and Vermont in general, I think, is poised to be a significant player, especially for its size, in what is now the gig economy, the tech economy, where you can work remotely. Anyone can take an idea and germinate it and attract the talent to be able to grow something that becomes a sizable operation and to be impactful to the area. So
Burlington Telecom actually, despite all the issues that it was going through, built something that national folks attended to. People said something's happening up there.
It is very rare in the United States to have fiber to the home, and that's the strength.
So what kind of businesses are demanding gig access? Who is this, and is it happening in people's homes as well as businesses? Who are the people that are really excited and going for it now?
Right now, the folks that are utilizing those big pipes are pushing vast amounts of data, so they're big data operations, or folks that have video-intensive kind of transfers that they have to do. They're media-related things. What's coming is really a sort of more a vision than a reality right now, because there's so few communities that are connected by super high-speed bandwidth. That's what US Ignite and the National Science Foundation are trying to seed the well of, are these next generation, what are now called smart gigabit city applications. And it's really bounded only by the imagination. Can you do surgery remotely? Can you play a concert with musicians that are in multiple places around the country with no latency, no delay? So you're jamming together over a wide area network. And really anything else you can think of. Virtual reality is something that's poised to take off, whether that's a virtual reality experience at a sporting event, so you're actually on the field with players. in high resolution and high def, so it'll require more significant bandwidth, or it's in a learning environment, and your distance education at, say, Champlain College or UVM, those students could be anywhere in the world and be virtually sitting in the classroom versus an asynchronous learning environment right now.
Or, yeah, it's challenging to do remote education as much as we've been trying it. I can certainly see it for healthcare, and you know, doing remote surgery is kind of astounding, but even looking at x-rays,
Yes.
or with the kind of detail that people need. So it also, we're kind of dependent on what other cities are part of this network.
Yes, and there's 15 cities that are poised to be part of this gigabit Genie rack network, but there will be many more that come online over time.
So are some of these partners leveraging this right now as we speak, or is everybody still scratching their heads about what to do? Because we've had this for a while, right?
Well, we have
the pipes
gigabit in the city. We have not the Genie rack, this deployment where we'll be connected to 14 other cities with super high speed 100 gigabit connections, is set to be deployed this summer. And I should emphasize that next-gen internet and these applications are just a fragment of what the Ignite communities around the nation are working on, including in Burlington. We're working on a whole host of things that relate to everything from STEM education or STEAM education, including arts, to next steps in how to do coding competitions and launching new businesses, to how do we accommodate the right spaces for new startups and growing businesses that are in the tech sector. How do we retrain existing workforce? What grants we can attract to try to support all of those activities? And how do we brand the greater Burlington area and Vermont as tech-focused? Because there is an enormous tech focus going on here, and it's a story that you don't yet hear at the surface.
No, you still hear maple syrup, which is also good. But do we have the workforce? Do we have the infrastructure that can handle something, I mean, for this, I mean, not Silicon Valley, but or whatever you're imagining this can bring to the area? Do we have that?
We do in proportion to our size, but we will need more. We need to be able, our growing tech businesses need to be able to attract and retain more talent. And one of the common themes over the last few months as I've been out listening to lots of people, that's been my primary role for the first few months, is the need to, because the branding component isn't fully formed yet, when you're trying to attract tech talent and then train and retain the 20-somethings that are coming out of college, or retraining existing workforce, it's to get to that point where you've got critical mass and things are sort of self-generating. And we can see the edge of that coming. We just have to be mindful about ensuring that we continue to build out capacity, continue to support these new businesses that are getting off the ground, educational initiatives, retraining, those kinds of things, so that we get to the point where it's the Gladwell tipping point we're looking for.
So can everybody access this? One of your partners is Essex, but they're not on the Burlington fiber, or are they? Can somebody from a home call you up and say, hey, I heard that there is the big pipes, I want to be in? How does that work? Is it just Burlington? Who can use this?
It depends where you are, what kind of speed you can get, but as I mentioned, there's 8 providers spread around the area, and there's a lot of great networks out there, and they continue to build every day. I think one of the important messages is you don't need to be directly on gigabit right now to be able to be a meaningful part of the tech ecosystem. It's everything from kindergarten kids who are learning how to code on iPads, and they don't even know they're learning how to code because they're doing gaming, to folks that are changing careers and looking to go to a code camp that's run by one of the local providers. You don't always need super high bandwidth to be able to do that. But one of the things we will focus on in the months to come is ensuring that the digital divide doesn't grow any wider, and that we do more to try to bridge that, including training underserved populations and bringing those code camps out to youth centers and things like that.
Well, How does this benefit the community as a whole? What is the public benefit? Is there a quality of life component to this, or is it just about geeks going, oh my gosh, we've got all this bandwidth, look, what can we do with it?
The bandwidth piece is a little more elusive for the common people at this point, because it really is, it's like the internet. All right, at 1992, 93, 94, people start to dial in. All right, what are we going to do with this? We can search for things on AOL. We can send email. What are the possibilities? We're sort of at that crossroads relative to the growth of and the implementation of bandwidth as the thing that will level playing fields across the world. So that's less a mainstream story right now than the ability for anyone to be positively impacted by technology, whether that's in healthcare and prevention, whether it is in training for job skills, whether it's in education. All of the core things that you think about on a day-to-day basis all have a technology intersection. Every company, arguably today, every organization, every nonprofit, every government operation has technology at its core. It's no longer a peripheral component of what we do. Like, we were typing affidavits in the late 80s on a typewriter. The typewriter was peripheral. Now the computers actually help to inform what goes into the affidavits, and it's a core component of operations.
So 5 to 10 years from now, how will Burlington be different?
Hopefully in a few key ways. One, it will hopefully be thought of as in addition to being a great place to live, to visit, to be a tourist, to see maple syrup, to see ice cream, to see all the things that we have to offer. In addition to all of those things, not only Burlington, but the area and potentially the entire state will be thought of as a place where there's a tech-centric focus. And as we've got such a history of innovation in Vermont and in Burlington, that it's just taking that innovative nature and branding it onto all of the things that are happening in technology. People would be shocked to see all of the things that are happening. It's just under the surface. So there's that. There's a reinvention of and a binding together of the big institutional partners in Ignite: the university, the hospital, Champlain, the Chamber of Commerce, the city, the electric department, telecom, to the small businesses, to research, to government operations, to create a smart city where you can go online and you can do everything. Everything or nothing, whichever you decide.
As long as, right, as it's leveraged right.
Exactly. And so there's that component. There's next generation STEM education, that through your entire experience in schools, that there are offerings in science and technology and learning opportunities outside the classroom to see and unpackage all of the interesting things that are happening and make connections to those community-based organizations and the startups and those kinds of things. Those are just a few of them.
Yeah, it just makes me think also, isn't this an opportunity for people to be able to make applications and write software that the big pipes can use? So we could be on the ground level for that.
Exactly. And Internet of Things. There are companies in our area that are building the chips that will sit in the Internet of Things, that will allow everything to communicate, again, as much or as little as people want it to communicate, but then you have to write all the software that goes on top of that to make it all work in a safe and secure and effective way, and there's great opportunity.
Well, speaking of that, another thing that you're involved in is you are the chairman, or at least part of this small committee, IT committee for the state. The legislature put this into they passed it last year to make the state's IT more effective and efficient because it's had so much trouble. How are we doing? Is there hope? I mean, it's one thing to have the technology, it's another thing to get it working.
There absolutely is hope. There are a lot of great things going on. Again, behind the scenes, there aren't typically headlines about IT success stories because they're not that flashy sometimes.
Or they're expected.
Yeah, you hope that they all go well, so there'll be less to write about. So there's a lot of great things going on in information technology in state government. And I was one of 3 people on this, on the committee that just finished its work in January and submitted a report to the legislature.
I made some suggestions.
We did make some suggestions, and one of them I've actually already mentioned, that it's taking IT from sort of being in the hallway as this peripheral thing that you trip over and taking it to the center of the way that you empower state employees to do their work, that you empower the public to be able to access information, that transparency is not just about knowing what government does, but being able to unpack the data, not people's personal private information, but trending data so that researchers or students can take a look at it and pose questions and offer solutions that we haven't thought of. We offered some suggestions around financing, moving from a traditional model of paying for something using bonding for 20 years when you don't expect the technology to last 20 years to some other hybrid model, and a variety of other things.
Terrific. This is all very exciting. Maybe in our web extra we'll talk about a little criminal activity, which you're so good at, what happens on the internet, and whether that's better or worse on the pipe.
To be clear, not doing the criminal activity on the internet.
Indeed. Michael Schirling, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Vermont PBS would like you to connect with us. Feel free to reach out with feedback and ideas at connect@vermontpbs.org. You can also check out other episodes and extra material at Vermont PBS's website. Thanks. See you next time.
Connect on Vermont PBS is sponsored in part by the Alma Gibbs Donsion Foundation, supporting Vermont institutions that support the underserved and promoting the betterment of life for all.